Okay, good morning, everybody. It is 11:05. I promised that we would go ahead and get started today. Welcome back, everybody returning, and welcome to all our new faces. I'm so glad to have you, as always. Today, we're going to be focusing more on a basic of genealogy, the obituary, and we're going to try to tie it in to how you can use it to begin your start for Catholic genealogy research. Also, we're going to try to relate it to the request or the information boxes on the Archdiocese form in the hopes that you can use these to help you fulfill the information that's necessary to do an Archdiocese request. So let's begin. Here it is, session 3, navigating newspaper databases for obituaries. Today, September 26, 2020. Welcome. This is the third session. This is the third session of a 6-week Zoom collaboration between my institution, the City Archives and Special Collections at New Orleans Public Library, and of course, the Office of Archives and Records of the Archdiocese of New Orleans, and New Orleans Catholic Cemeteries. Today, we're going to discuss how to use your regional Southeast Louisiana public library cards to access newspaper databases and find obituaries, often the starting point for researching your Catholic ancestors. Of course, I'll address caveats to access, etc. And during our question and answer session, we will, of course, address a lot of these caveats. Of course, as per usual, housekeeping. Please make note of any questions you have during the presentation and reserve them until we open the chat function at the end. We will address the content of this presentation only. If your question pertains to a future presentation, please save it, or to a past presentation, please email us. We'll have our contact information up at the end of the session. We will get to as many questions as we can between the end of my presentation and 12:15. And of course, as always, if you guys aren't familiar, recordings of each session are available on the Programs and Presentations page at my website, archives.nolalibrary.org, on the Tuesday following each session. So don't worry if you can't write as fast as I speak or as fast as the words appear on the screen. You will be able to view the presentation again, and I will also be posting a PDF of the slides on the same website. Once again, as you see here, and it will be mentioned many times in the presentation, archives.nolalibrary.org. The link specifically to our program hub page, so to speak, is the very first one under New at the Archives, which is the top section on our page. Check it out, you'll see extra materials, and again, you can rewatch those YouTube video recordings of our past sessions anytime. So yes, here's a demonstration. Here's the link. Here's archives.nolalibrary.org, the homepage of the City Archives and Special Collections as housed in New Orleans Public Library. As you can see here, under the New at the Archives section, I have Identifying Your Catholic Ancestors Fall 2020 Genealogy Series. Just click on that, and then the web page in this small graphic in the corner, as you can see, is organized into each session breakdown. So let's meet our presenters. Today, it's going to be me, Amanda Follis, and I am a librarian and archivist at the New Orleans City Archives and Special Collections at New Orleans Public Library. I work with genealogical and municipal government records, and I hold a Master's of Library and Information Science and am a certified archivist. Our other presenters in the past weeks and in our next weeks to come are Kimberly Johnson, the Senior Processing Archivist and Records Analyst for the Office of Archives and Records at the Archdiocese of New Orleans. There, she helps manage conservation and preservation of historic and current records. She holds a Master's of Arts in History and is a certified archivist. Today, my wing ladies are Heather Veneziano and Katie Vest. Heather Veneziano is the Director of Public Engagement and Development for New Orleans Catholic Cemeteries, as well as an architectural historian and cultural heritage advisor with the preservation firm of Gambrill and Peak. She holds a Master's of Fine Art and a Master's of Preservation Studies. Katie Vest is the research archivist for the Office of Archives and Records at the Archdiocese of New Orleans. In addition, she researches and translates genealogy requests in French, Spanish, Italian, and German for them. She holds a Master's of Arts in History with an emphasis on public history and is now a certified archivist. So let's go over today's agenda in short, what we will cover today. So we're going to start with the basics. What is an obituary? I know many of you will be familiar with this, but it's always important to start from the beginning and give the whole picture. We won't linger too long, but I'm going to go over the basics. Then we'll go on to religious and burial information in obituaries. And we're going to do this in the context of the Archdiocese sacramental request form that we learned about last week. Basically, we're going to focus obviously on burial and funeral sacramental rites, but I will make some notes as to where you can find an information in an obituary that may help you with even a baptism or a marriage. It depends. Then we're going to get into a more technical discussion about how to find the obituary citations. Specifically, as you all know, this is all focusing on New Orleans. I'm going to refer to a couple of New Orleans obituary indices that you have free access to with or without a library card anytime. This will give you citations for newspaper articles or newspaper printings of the obituaries so you can view them and so you can find the information. Lastly, we're going to go into the technical one. This is going to be essentially a computer tutorial about how to access our local newspaper databases to view the obituary citations you found. So let's get right into this. What is an obituary? It is a death announcement placed in a newspaper by a family member or a clergyperson for a fee. These did cost money and they were not available to everyone. Also, during pandemics and times like that, they may have happened too quickly for the newspaper to even keep up with the demand. Who? This is who you want to find and who the obituary is about. You hope to find in an obituary immediate family, relatives, ancestors, friends, and other persons of interest to you. It's going to depend from obituary to obituary who you actually end up getting in yours. It's important to search either way. Whether it's 2 sentences or 12, it's still another piece that you can add to your file. Where? For our purposes, we're looking at obituaries published by news services either online or in scans of physical newspapers online. What do I mean by that? I mean either somebody typed in the text of the original in a computer format, or like our newspaper databases, it's a scan of the original microfilm, so it looks just like the paper did when you were flipping through it. It's a page by page, issue by issue presentation. Why? Today specifically, we're doing this so we can hopefully find out what Catholic cemetery somebody may have been buried in, or what church they may have been in the neighborhood in if they don't mention the cemetery. Generally, we hope to find details such as the cemetery, home address, birthplace, and relatives. This is an important note, and I can't stress this enough. Not everyone had an obituary. You will reach some dead ends in your search for obituaries. Conversely, obituaries are really one of the bread and butter starting points for genealogy searches. They're widely indexed for various papers across the nation. We have a lot of great indexing for the ones here in New Orleans. They're a really good entry point. Of course, that being said, again, not everyone had one. So it's not a vital record. It is not a legal government document like a death record. Oops, excuse me. Religious and burial information in obituaries. So this is kind of a more specific version of what I mentioned in the previous slide, but we're going to be looking for dates. We're going to be looking for dates of death, hopefully so we can maybe do the math and get a birth year. We're going to look for dates of residency in a city. That helps. We're going to look for dates of birth if they do actually say. And we want to know the date of the funeral, of course, because that's going to be important to requesting a funeral sacrament. We're going to want family. We're going to want to look for spouses. We're going to look for children, parents, really anybody. In case you can't find the first 3, you want other relatives so you can try to trace them and maybe do a workaround. Locations. Of course, we're hoping for the cemetery, we're hoping for the home address, we're hoping for maybe the nation of birth. Perhaps your search for a birth sacrament is going to take you to another country. We also want the funeral location if possible. Events. This is more for your genealogical file and research. You might want to know about disease, disasters, accidents. This is going to be just for you to create a more specific portrait of the person you're researching. That being said, these are the least likely bits of information to find in an obituary, but still worth looking for. And of course, specifically, considering we are talking about this all in the context of the Archdiocese of New Orleans, we want to know religion, profession, charity work, any sort of connection that we can make to the church. So, you guys may remember this from last session, but this is the Archdiocese request form. In full, I'm going to go into it in detail in a moment, but I'm going to talk about the information in obituaries in the context of this form. I'm going to try to go into a field by field analysis of what's likely, what's possible, and what we're going to focus on. So as I say here, while we're focusing on burial and funeral sacraments, some information in obituaries can help even with baptisms and marriages. Not a guarantee, but still worth looking at them for that purpose. So this is my in-depth look at it here. So what I've done here is I have circled ones in yellow that we may get from an obituary and that we may want to try to find. And I've circled in red the ones that we're really trying to find in an obituary. Now, none of this is a guarantee, but these are kind of organized by what you're most likely to find if you do get an obituary and what you're less likely to find, but it's still worth looking at one to see if you can get that information. So let's start with the church in which the sacrament was performed. This is not a given, but it's something that we would like to know. And it would work for all 4 types of sacraments. It would work for baptism, marriage, funeral, and burial. Chances are, as a historic person in New Orleans, you did not move too far away from your home parish church, so to speak. Not your parishes in your Louisiana county. But the hope is that you didn't move too far from the local church and that there was a desire to perform as many sacraments as possible in the church that matter the most to you in your life. Moving on, baptism and marriage. Those are indirect sacraments that we might find information in obituary about. We could perhaps reason out the age from a death date. We could reason out a year for a baptism, or we may find mention of a spouse or possibly parents, both of which are information points we could later use for a marriage request. What we're focusing on today, of course, are going to be funeral and burial rites. So we want to find out what church the funeral may have been held in and where the body may have been buried. As I understand it, you were likely to have possibly a funeral at the church that you were in the neighborhood of, but cemeteries are not necessarily connected on a neighborhood by neighborhood basis because there are different amounts of cemeteries at different times throughout New Orleans history, whereas there are far more churches than cemeteries. Of course, the big thing that you will find if you find an obituary at all is going to be the name at the time of sacrament. That's how you found the obituary in the first place, was through the name. So that will be, of course, be the name at the time of sacrament. The approximate date of the sacrament will also be a given too, because if you found the obituary, you found the approximate date. The obituary is going to run ideally, barring express circumstances like dying in a war overseas or some other issue, or dying in another city, another locale. Ideally, the obituary will have run within a month or so of the funeral or burial sacrament. Again, back to date of birth for baptism, you would do the math if they do mention the age at time of death. Date of death, as I just said, would correspond to approximate date of sacrament. The names of parents, as I mentioned before in relation to marriage, we would hope to find perhaps parents' names or spouses' names. And then notes. Anything else that doesn't really fulfill any of these fields that we've looked at here today, you should include in the notes if you find it in an obituary. As my colleagues at the Archdiocese and cemeteries have said before, every little bit of information helps. So we're going to try to reiterate this again, but what you hope to find is either a church or home address. In this example here, I show religious services at St. Rose de Lima Church on Bayou Road and Broad Street. And of course, I get a cemetery location, which is interment in St. Louis No. 3 Cemetery. Of course, if you don't get the name of a church, the home address will help you determine on a map where the nearest Catholic church was. In this case, even though they do mention Mr. Maggio's church, they also mention his address. And sometimes in a lot of obituaries, especially historic ones, you're going to find a home address more often than you're going to find a church address. But what you do is you take that home address, put it on a map, and look at the Catholic churches in the vicinity. That will give you a range of options to put on your request form and hopefully narrow it down. As I've said, you could possibly get parents or children's names for baptism and marriage sacraments. As you can see here, we've got his beloved husband of Nancy Bercato. So you can follow Nancy Bercato's line. And you can also find out about his children and grandchildren. So if you were perhaps searching his children and came to him, that would be a roundabout way to get to marriage and baptism. You can also calculate a year of birth. So in this case, if they had mentioned the age at which he died, you could subtract that from the date, which is April 17th, 1953. You could hopefully get a year of birth. Of course, in this case, you wouldn't be looking for a birth sacrament for this gentleman because he is a native of Cefalù, Italy. He's been a resident of this city for the past 32 years, but he was born in Italy. So this is an indicator that you may have to turn to Italian records to find his birth sacrament. Let's see here. Excuse me, I apologize. So in this one, we're going to look at Joseph Edward Farrell. So let me read this to you. On Sunday, April 21st, 1919 at 9:30 p.m., Joseph Edward Farrell, beloved husband of Edna Ackerman and son of Mary Curran and the late John T. Farrell, a native of this city. Relatives and friends of the family and the officers and members of the Police Benevolent Association are respectfully invited to attend the funeral, which will take place from his late residence, number 300 South Broad Street, on Tuesday, April 23rd, 1919 at it looks like 3:00 p.m. Interment in St. Patrick's Cemetery No. 1. This obituary gives us a lot of information. It gives us his burial location, it gives you the area to search for a church, and it gives you his parents' names for additional searches, as well as his wife's name for a marriage search. Luckily, we get a lot of information here. I'll kind of outline it right here. So you get the date and time of death, the marital status, the parents. It's interesting to note in this one that there are no children listed. This may have been sort of a branch on the tree that you were searching for. His place of birth is New Orleans. He does have an association with the Police Benevolent Association, which may lead you to other records, providing they exist. There is, of course, his address, South Broad. Look for the nearest Catholic church on a map. And then his burial is at St. Patrick's Cemetery No. 1. Easy peasy, straight up information. So we've got a kind of quick idea of what an obituary is and how it will relate to the Archdiocese records request. So let's move on to how to find an obituary citation so you can find the obituary itself in the newspaper. So since we're focusing on New Orleans, depending on the time period, we have two primary options for finding New Orleans obituaries. The primary one, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is the City Archives Louisiana Biography and Obituary Index. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. It covers the years 1804 to 1972. The other one, if you need to continue on into more modern citations, is going to be the US GenWeb's Archives Times-Picayune Obituary Index, which is an all-volunteer program and covers 1972 to 2011. Let me get into describing both of these for y'all. So the City Archives Louisiana Biography and Obituary Index, which we'll probably be casually referring to as the City Archives Obituary Index from here on out. It is, of course, available online at archives.nolalibrary.org. If you don't already know about our website, even though I've said it a couple times and we'll say it a couple more, this is the one. This is the website that you want to go to find out what the City Archives has for you. It is, of course, a collaboration between New Orleans Public Library and the Historic New Orleans Collection staff and volunteers. It started out as a physical card index that was started by the Works Progress Administration in the 1930s and 40s, and then, of course, evolved into a digital database that you can access from home anywhere, with or without a library card. No barriers to entry. It is based, of course, on over 650,000 cards that are in these 15 cabinets and on 150 drawers that I show you in this picture right here. We still have them today. They were maintained in a physical format until probably within the last 10 years. Of course, beyond that, it is all volunteer driven and it stops at 1972. The Works Progress Administration in the 30s and 40s was keen on giving lots of possible jobs to as many people as possible, given the extent of the Great Depression. It was a very important thing that brought a lot of our very ancestors out of, poverty and into opportunity. It was a wonderful program, and it provided us with the very resources that we as genealogists are going to be using today. As you see here, what happened was people were employed to go through the physical papers dating back to 1804 to find every single obituary they could in every single paper, to write it down, and then to type those up on index cards. If it hasn't occurred to you yet, this took a lot of people, a lot of time, and it lasted nearly a decade. And then, of course, was continued by wonderful volunteers that helped the New Orleans Public Library through 1972. Let's take a look at it as it exists now, which is the digital format. This is the primary format. It's not ever going to cover beyond the years listed, but it is substantially thorough for at least the Times-Picayune, the primary paper of this city. So as you can see here, this is what it looks like. This is the main page here. It covers various New Orleans papers from 1804 to 1972. Some newspapers are more thoroughly covered than others. Like I said, it's substantially complete for the Times-Picayune, which has always been one of the main papers of the city. It is, of course, substantially complete for the other papers that rivaled it, such as the States, the Item, and the States Item. There is an interesting thing where all of these papers have eventually converged into the Times-Picayune, now the Advocate. There are, of course, links to additional volunteer projects that continue through 2012. Those are over to the left-hand side of the screen, and I will note them when we move on to those. So let's go through the nitty-gritty literal process of getting there. So first, you want to go to archives.nolalibrary.org. As you can see here, this is what it looks like. Then once you're there, you want to scroll down through those sections on the right-hand side until you get to genealogy. It's going to be the very first link under genealogy, Louisiana Biography / Obituary Index, as I have here in a red box with 2 green arrows pointing at it. That is going to be your link to this wonderful obituary index and subsequent links to the other ones. Here you go. Once inside, to search the index proper, click on Search the Index. It will work as a link and will get you inside. And this is what it looks like. You're going to be starting on a search screen, and here I've got an example search result. So to break this down, over on the search screen, you see a lot of fields. Of course, you'll want to start with one, see if you get too many results or not, and move on. We'll discuss that in a second. And then if you do get the result that you want, this is the example search result. I'll discuss what's most important to you on these search result pages. So in this case, we're going to do a search for Allen, which admittedly, I'm sorry if that's your last name. It could be my last name. It's anybody's last name, but it is a common one. So if we start with just Allen, as you can see over on the right-hand side here, I have over 20 pages of 10 results each. That is a lot of pages and a lot of results, and it's nothing that we can reasonably search through to tease out who we're looking for. So that kind of explains, you'll have to make a judgment call on whether to just start with the surname or not. If you end up with too many results, what we'll do next is we'll add a first name too. This should help us narrow down a common last name. In this case, we're looking for Tina Allen. She's my favorite example. Some of you all may be very familiar with her. So, surname plus first name, we've got one result for Mrs. Tina Allen. She's going to have quite a lot of information. Her obituary index citation, which is what we're looking at right now, has a lot of information. She had a couple of husbands and she has had a couple of last names, which is very interesting. We'll see in a second that all of this came from the obituary, which is wonderful. It's not what everybody gets, but it's wonderful that all this information was in one place. But this is the most important part of your result, is obituary citations, the ones that I've outlined in red here. Those are going to be the paper, the day that it ran, and the page and column. As you can see here, hers ran 3 times, which is common. Oftentimes people were able to put the same obituary or slightly different ones in the paper multiple times. They're all worth looking at if you can. But just to break it down, the first part, Times-Picayune, that is the name of the newspaper. The second part, 1938-10-06, that is the date that it ran in the paper. While their death date is important, if you want to find the obituary, you need to pay attention to the obituary date. You will want to, of course, record the death date for any sacramental searches, but if you want to see the obituary for further information, you need to record this information right here. Page 2, column 7 refers to the page number, and the column number is going across from left to right. Let's move on. So these are just some sort of parameters. Of course, if you don't hit pay dirt the first time, always be flexible and try different spellings. We always reiterate this in every genealogy program that we do, but it's important to try different spellings for things. My quick example is, think of history as a long game of written telephone. Somebody heard it wrong, wrote it down wrong, somebody 30 years later typed it wrong, and then somebody in 2016 typed it wrong again in a computer. It just happens. Keep an open mind, develop a list of alternate spellings for anybody you're looking for. Just keep those tucked in your head to use for searches like this. Start with only the last name if it is a less common name. If you have a less common name, like, just to use myself, like Follis, not super common, I would probably do well just to start with my last name. The more fields you enter, the fewer results you'll get. Too many search terms, too many fields filled out can mean the difference between 1 result and 0 results. So don't overly limit yourself. Start broad and move inward. So let's talk about the other important obituary index for New Orleans obituaries. And this is one of the volunteer ones that I think, well, one of them, it is the volunteer one. It's a wonderful resource, and it's really the way to find obituaries from 1972 to 2011. So, of course, you would head to the same place like you do on our website, where you go to the Louisiana and Biography Obituary Index, but instead of clicking Search the Index, you click on Other New Orleans Obit Indexing Projects. This is going to take you to the US GenWeb's Archives Times-Picayune Obit Index. So once you click on that, you are brought to this page, and the one that you want is Indexing for Times-Picayune Obituaries, right here in the middle. It's from NOVA, the New Orleans Volunteers for the US GenWeb project. And it indexes obituaries for various years from 1880 to the present. But our main interest in it, since the other obit index is substantially complete, is 72 to 2011. And this is what it looks like. It's very classic. Once you're inside, you're going to want to scroll down, and it's organized by year, as you can see at the very bottom of this page here. You can see, as they've listed here, 1974, 75, 76, etc. You want to choose a year. So we're clicking on a year, click, click. And then this is what it looks like. It is text only. It's not even HTML, which gives early web pages at least some graphic differentiation. No, this is straight text. It includes every day that the paper ran that year. As I've said here, that's a lot of names, isn't it? That is anywhere from 10 to 40 names a day for the entire year. How will we find who we need? This is what gets difficult with all text databases, but then again, it's not that difficult because I have a trick for you all with your keyboard that you want to remember. You can use this on any web page. And that is Control plus F on your keyboard. Press Control and F at the same time on any keyboard when you're on a web page to use the find function. Think of it as a search bar for any web page you're ever on. So what you want to do is press Control and F, and depending on which browser you're using, you will end up with a box similar to the one that I have circled here at near the top of your browser window. And that's your find window. And it's going to find whatever word you decide to search on the page. In this example, I've used Orso, so I have typed in Orso. As you can see off to the side, I'm using the browser Internet Explorer. If you're not familiar with what browsers are, some sample names to throw out there are Internet Explorer, Chrome, Firefox, Safari. Those are all ways to browse the internet. And you'll get something like this. You'll see I've entered my name. It says that I have 4 matches, which is great. And I just press enter and it takes me to those matches and even highlights them, as you can see here. I am looking for Claude, Sabine, Orso. And this is our citation based off this index. We get the day. Now we don't get the page and column, but that doesn't matter because anytime we go to the newspaper on the front page, there's going to be a little box in one of the corners, the bottom corner or the top corner, that tells you what section the deaths were in. And you'll just go to that for this paper, which is January 1st, 1978. So this is your citation. This is what you want to write down. So now we move on to the technical aspect, which is accessing the actual newspaper databases to view the obituary citations. So what we're going to cover in this section, I will say definitively will apply to card holders in Orleans, Jefferson, St. Tammany, and East Baton Rouge Parish from my experience, as all of them have confirmed access to the Historic Times-Picayune/Daily Picayune via the Newsbank database. I'm going to use our entry point as an example, but as long as you have your library card, you should be able to do it. Now, some of us, such as Orleans and possibly East Baton Rouge Parish, we offer non-resident cards, which I'll kind of direct you to how to get to the page with more information on that. It's very cheap and gets you blanket access to our all our databases, including the historically significant ones, for $50 a year, which if you think about it is substantially cheaper than paying just $20 a month to NOLA.com for access to the same database. And that's not even including the other 12 we got. So for non-residents, these can be accessed through paid non-resident cards, as I just described, which, contact us for more info, or paid subscription services such as newspapers.com and genealogybank.com. I will note that part of your non-resident card subscription to at least Orleans and Jefferson, possibly St. Tammany and East Baton Rouge, gets you access to a limited version of newspapers.com for the regional Southeast. Of course, as I say here, please visit our primary library website, nolalibrary.org, and choose Services, and then Library Card Information and Application for instructions on obtaining a non-resident card. So we have a citation. Now what do? we should use these free library databases that I'm about to show you. The main library database is powered by Newsbank. On the Jefferson Parish Library gateway, it's called Newsbank. On New Orleans Public Library's gateway, it's called New Orleans Newspapers. But rest assured, it takes you to the same place. We do have slightly different subscription options. Both of us have the Times-Picayune from 1838 to 1988. East Baton Rouge and St. Tammany will have something similar to this. Please give them a contact or go to the website to just confirm. Jefferson Parish has the New Orleans Times/Weekly Times from 1863 to 1881, which is nice because we don't have that one. And then we have the States Item and States Item from 1877 to 1979. Apologies if Jefferson has obtained the same ones. They may have by now, I'm not sure, but you can check with your library card. Other papers beyond the ones that I've just mentioned. They may be on newspapers.com, which is offered for free through New Orleans Public Library and Jefferson Parish Library. If it is not, it is probably on microfilm. Given the pandemic situation, we are offering a lot of stuff digitally now. Please email your citation to archivist@nolalibrary.org, and we will send you a digital copy from the paper that it appeared in. Of course, limits apply, but generally we're doing a couple for free right now. Jefferson Parish Library offers portions of the B digitized directly on their website from 1827 to 1923. I don't believe it's text searchable, but it is an easy way to access the B beyond newspapers.com. If it ran, and also you can access it without any sort of library card, which is cool. Of course, if your obituary ran from 1988 to 2017, you'll likely need to email us as well. And that's because, for reasons I think maybe related to copyright, but we've never gotten a real answer, Newsbank has the papers from 1988 to 2017 in text-only format, like they typed in the information. It's not an actual scan of the newspaper, so you don't have the obituary section or the ads. There are a couple of other things that just aren't available. Now, they have been slowly working to switch over to just the full scan of the paper, but they haven't given us a timeline, and we find that it's very random what has and hasn't happened. I have found that a lot of the ones from that time period, only section A has been digitized so far, and deaths are usually in section B. So kind of out of luck. Unless, of course, you email us and we look it up on the microphone for you. So let's talk about how to get to these databases. First, you want to access your library's Louisiana Library Connection database portal. Usually on your home library, that just is your databases section. I'll show you how to do it through our site. This will actually work for you as long as your parish library has a subscription to Louisiana Library Connection and Newsbank and newspapers.com. There are similar ways to access it through your home library. It's just important to know that what determines what you see when you log into the Louisiana Library Connection is your parish's card number. That's how they tell what to show you when you use it. You can always just go directly to the Louisiana Library Connection website, which is right here. I'll give you a second to write this down, although it is in some of the supplemental materials that we posted for this week on the hub page, but it's LaLibCon for Louisiana Library Connection .state.lib.la.us. It's a little bit of a mouthful, but it's not as bad as some URLs I've seen in my lifetime. I'll leave that up for y'all for a second. Okay, I'm gonna move on now. So this is how you access it through our webpage, but don't worry, this will get you to your respective library's database offerings. So when you're on our webpage, you want to click on Research, then Databases, and you'll end up on the portal page here. You'll be asked to enter your library card number or password. Don't worry about a password. Really what they want is your library card number. So you'll be entering your Jefferson, your St. Tammany, your East Baton Rouge, and of course there are other parishes that subscribe as well. That's where you'll be entering your library code number. Of course, you need to be a parish that subscribes to Newsbank that features the New Orleans newspapers. Once you've logged into the databases, you want to scroll down and look on the left for New Orleans newspapers or Newsbank, depending on who you're accessing through, in newspapers.com. And this is what it looks like. This is from us. It's on the left-hand side in a section called My Libraries Databases, which is how you'll have your respective libraries databases represented. As I've said, we list it as New Orleans newspapers, but generally people have it listed as Newsbank, and it's the same thing. And then newspapers.com is the other one, and that's what many of us also have. We're going to do Newsbank. We're clicking on Historic New Orleans Newspapers / Newsbank. And this is what it looks like. It's got kind of this sort of a picture of people in a library with a search bar and this quote about Newsbank. And then it's got all these suggested topics down to the bottom. There's Spock right there in the middle, which is kind of cool. I did that wrong. Anyway, but over to, and this is generally true of all of us, over to the right-hand side, you'll see these blue buttons. You want to click on the collection that is probably most applicable to you. For us, generally, it's Historic New Orleans newspapers, historic, current, etc. Explore them all. It's worth exploring. But this will vary from parish to parish, but you should eventually at least get to the Times-Picayune based off the 4 parishes that I've mentioned. Excuse me. I need some water. Okay. So once you click on it, in this case, I've clicked on Historic New Orleans newspapers, you get this screen, and this has a general search bar. There's a little link to do an advanced search, but we're not searching today. Today, we already have a citation, so we want to browse directly to the citation. So here we go. We're here. We want to pick the newspaper that our citation ran in, which in this case is going to be the Times-Picayune. Oops. Oh yeah, Historic New Orleans newspapers. I forgot I circled that, y'all. So using Historic New Orleans newspapers / Newsbank. Once you've clicked on that, this is what you get. Once you've chosen a paper, you want to choose a year from the drop-down menu, which I have right here. And then you want to choose a year, which you've already chosen. Then you want to choose your month, and then you want to choose your day. In this case, we've chosen the year 1938, the month October, and the date the 6th, although my circle's a little off there. And this is what happens when you click on that day. You get the paper, as you can see here in the lower left. So you can choose the page number from the drop-down menu if you have that. It will lead you over to the deaths page, which we're on page 2. As you can see, our Tina Allen is actually Mrs. Tina Pecorina Bongiovanni Spicuzza Allen. And she has a wonderful media obituary here. Let's read it. So, Mrs. Allen of 2334 Royal Street, important data point, on Wednesday, October 5th, 1938, important data point, at 10:00 p.m., Tina Pecorina, wife of Frank Bongiovanni by first marriage and Thomas Spicuzza by second marriage, and Thomas Allen, mother of Mrs. E. Grand, Mrs. M. Gondel, Mrs. S. Pizzatolo, Mrs. V. Simpson, Mrs. A. Reagan, Mrs. B. Escandal, Mrs. C. Mathern, Sam Bongiovanni, John and Thomas Spicuzza. Woo, that is a lot of kids, but there they all are. She was aged 57 years, a native of Lake Charles, Louisiana, and a resident of New Orleans for 30 years. Relatives and friends of the family are invited to attend the funeral, which will take place Friday, October 7th, 1938 at 9:30 a.m. from the mortuary of Jacob Schoen and Son, which was a popular mortuary in the area, 527 Elysian Fields Avenue. And her service was going to be at St. Peter and Paul Church, which I actually live around the corner from. Her interment is going to be in St. Roch Cemetery. So you find a lot of location here, very helpful. Most important thing, we know that the sacrament was performed at St. Peter and Paul Church, the funeral sacrament, and that she was interred at St. Roch Cemetery. Let's move on. That was newspapers, or New Orleans newspapers / Newsbank. Let's move on to newspapers.com. It's very similar to Newsbank in this layout. So as you can see, it's run by Ancestry, at least the library edition is. So there's a lot of similarities in the way that the layouts are. But because we have a citation, we're going to browse as per usual. The papers in our newspapers.com collection tend to cover Southeast United States. They tend to cover between the 1800s to the 1930s. They can be spotty, but if you get a citation from a smaller paper that's not the Times-Picayune, the States, the item, this is probably a good place to look before you have to worry about consulting us to look at the microfilm. So we want to click on Browse here. And so this is what it'll look like. In our specific New Orleans Public Library, you get to choose your state, Louisiana, your city, New Orleans, your newspaper. So as you can see here, there's a lot of tiny newspapers, and this isn't even the full list, but we have a bunch. In this case, we're going to choose the Daily Delta. We're going to choose the year 1850, the month, February, and then the very date. And then even though this only has one page displayed here, if there are more pages, they'll be displayed here and you can click directly on the page. I kind of like this browsing style, even though it looks kind of busy. It's kind of still clear cut. And so here we go. The database layout is very similar to Newsbank. I didn't really explain this earlier, but you can do a lot of things. You can print a copy. You can print a copy of a small clip. You can email it to yourself. You can email it to relatives. I often recommend just emailing it to yourself so you can decide what to do with it later, or saving the PDF of the full page so you can zoom in and out in your PDF program. Let's go ahead and take a look at two obituaries from this regional paper, the Daily Delta, which was attendant to New Orleans and the vicinity. So I actually went to the 29th September 1853 edition, but we have two, while they are very short obituaries, helpful obituaries for any sort of sacramental search for Mr. Pissarros and Mr. Gill. We'll start with Mr. Jean-Francois Pissarros Jr. He died on 1853, September 4th. He was 23 years old, and the obituary citation, this is from the Obituary Index, gave me Daily Delta, 1853, September 6th, page 2, column 5. And here it is. It's a little blurry, but I promise that generally these are fairly readable. If you are having too much trouble reading them, please just email us and we'll take a look or send you a copy from the microfilm that might be a little clearer. But we can see Mr. Pissarros, his funeral took place at the Red Church in Parish St. Charles. So that is a church that's still in existence today. I can't remember, I need Heather or Katie to chime in, but I believe St. Charles Parish is under the Archdiocese of New Orleans. And yes, okay, cool, awesome. Yes, so that's why it's helpful. You can get some stuff a little bit outside New Orleans that's still within the Archdiocese of New Orleans. And then of course, as you can see here, I'll read this to you since I know it is a little blurry. Yesterday, 28th instant, at noon, on his plantation in this parish, Mr. Jean-Francois Pissarros, aged 48 years. His friends and acquaintances are respectfully invited to attend the funeral, which will take place today at 12 o'clock from the Red Church, Parish St. Charles, September 29th, 1853. Let's move on to the next one, which is William Henry Gill. He was a young death. He was an infant when he died. This can still be very helpful to you. It's important to know the stories of everybody in your family tree if you can find them. So as we can see here, yesterday on the 20th instance at 3:30 p.m., William Henry Gill, age 2 years, the son of Michael and Margaret Gill. Important information if you want to try a birth or marriage sacrament. The friends and family are invited to attend his funeral, And it says from the residence of his parents on Felicity Road between Chippewa and Fulton Streets at 2 o'clock this afternoon. This is going to help you try to find the churches in the area that this may have happened at. So we're coming up to the conclusion of my part of the presentation. We're about to move on to questions, but what we have covered today are the library offered free versions of Newsbank and newspapers.com. I think it's important to mention, because I know not everybody is going to be from a parish that offers access or even from the state. Genealogybank.com is the commercial paid version of Newsbank databases. A subscription allows you to access papers from across the country, including the Times-Picayune and the local papers here for the Archdiocese of New Orleans. It is, of course, charged monthly. You will need to check on the website to find out what the actual fees are now. I know they run specials at holidays, and as you can see here, this may be slightly aged, but I feel like they generally always offer a 30-day or at least 10-day free access for you to try it. And this would be helpful if you're looking for out of the area, or if you yourself are out of the area. So this is quick. We touched on this last presentation. This is not exhaustive by any means, but this is a way to find other burial locations and possibly names you may need, but something that you should turn to if you aren't having success with obituaries first. There is, of course, a list of cemetery records available in the Louisiana Division City Archives Us, and that can be found on our website, archives.nolalibrary.org, but there are some access restrictions due to COVID. You'll just need to contact us. There is no comprehensive index to all of the cemeteries in New Orleans. It's just not a thing, unfortunately. But let me mention a couple of great websites for finding graves. There is, of course, the eponymous, the ubiquitous, the classic findagrave.com, always worth exploring and contributing to if you want to. You will help other genealogists if you do so. And of course, familysearch.org's the section on their website called Billion Graves with no space. That is very helpful as well. And then for Louisiana, I like la-cemeteries.com. So that being said, we have come to the end of my presentation today. Let's get into question and chat guidelines. I will shortly open up the chat for people to ask questions, and then we will put them to me, or if they're better answered by Heather or Katie, to Heather and Katie. So guidelines: only submit questions via chat. Please keep it clear of conversations or crosstalk. If you could, please only submit one question so everybody has an equal chance to ask. Only once we've finished questions, which we, to be honest, haven't been able to yet, should you submit a second question. As I've said here, submit only one question per participant if you could. Make sure your question pertains to the information I just presented. If not, just hold it or email us. I'm going to put our contact information up in a moment. We will get to as many questions as we can by 12:15. And again, please feel free to contact any of us if we don't get to your question today. And please feel free to watch the previous sessions on archives.nolalibrary.org. I am now going to put up the slide with our contact information, and in 1 second, I will have the chat open to start submitting questions. Okay. Okay, chat is now open for questions. Heather and Katie, I am not seeing the chat panel. Let me see. Or do you all? Ah, there we go.
Yeah.
Found it.
There we go.
Okay, I'll start here. Okay, so our first question is, what about obituaries in German newspapers? How can these be accessed? The two German newspapers are generally in the Louisiana biography and obituary index. We do have them. The Zeitung and well, it's Tägliche Deutsche Zeitung, that is indexed. Where would you look for obituaries before 1804? There's not a lot necessarily. There's not a lot of comprehensive newspapers prior to then. I would say I would check US GenWeb archives if there is any prior to that date, but there's just not a lot of newspapers before that time period that were running obituaries in New Orleans. Are there any records for non-Catholic churches? It depends. Unfortunately, the Protestant and other churches did not have quite as a centralized and expansive record-keeping operation as Catholic and Archdiocese did. There are limited sort of microfilms for very limited specific churches available for you to at least see if we have them on our website, archives.nolalibrary.org. I would check that. Next, for out-of-state residents, which is better, Genealogy Bank or newspapers to access Louisiana newspapers? I find it's a combination of the two for the exact reasons that it's a combination of the two for us. There's a lot more smaller papers in newspapers.com, and then the big papers are substantially covered by genealogybank.com. You mentioned that obits cost money in the 19th century. Some of my ancestors appeared in a simple death notice with no obit. Were those also done for a fee? Depending on the type of death notice, often those were paid for, but if it was related to a Board of Health report, they probably didn't pay for it. It really depends on what the procedure for the city and the papers was at that time period, but one sentence things could have been issued by the Board of Health or the health department, health organization as it existed at the particular time. I will put a link to the previous session in the chat later, just a moment. Let's see. Will an Orleans parish paid non-resident card allow persons to have remote access to historic New Orleans newspapers in your version of newspapers.com? Yes, it absolutely will. It will give you access to that and many, many more. We have Heritage Quest, we have Fold 3, we have Fire Insurance Maps Online, which is color Sanborns and other plat books, which is wonderful. We have Sanborn Maps Online, which covers some of the gaps in fire insurance maps, and many, many more. It is well worth the money than subscribing to each of those databases independently monthly. Is there ongoing correction to the New Orleans Public Library OBIT database? So, the database death age of 23 versus the newspaper obit read of 48 years, that's possibly because I was mixing my citation with the wrong newspaper example. But they do corrections. We do go through a process of double checking, making sure it's not two people with the same name that accidentally got conflated or were accidentally found instead of one another. You can always email us information. We then go through a process of researching and correcting, and then we need to submit it to the Historic New Orleans Collection to actually update the database. So it is a little bit of a process. Also, it's important to know that just because you understand a name to be spelled one way and you have found it that way in all your research doesn't mean that you don't have a distant relative on the other side of the country that may have experienced a resource that you haven't where it is spelled that way. Of course, to that end, we do make an effort when people tell us to make sure that multiple spellings will lead you to the same citation. We have a way to do that. How can you see the German newspaper obit since library is closed and there is no index, and there is index, but how can you see and access it? That's where you email us. If it's not part of newspapers.com database, as I said before, you would want to email us the citation and we will find the microfilm to make a copy for you. Let's see here. Where were we? when citing newspaper clippings, wouldn't you want to put the date first, then the newspaper? That way they can be indexed within a timeline with other genealogy information. I'm not sure. Our collection is organized by newspaper, not by date. That's the reason that the citations are organized by newspaper. There are many papers, I mean, anywhere from 5 to 40 that ran obituaries on the same day. So organizing by date is not necessarily a thing we do, but I mean, you could in your own family tree for sure. So there's only one link for all the previous chats, and I will put that in there for you. It is, as I said at the beginning, middle, and end, it's on archives.nolalibrary.org, and it's the very first link. Let me move back to the first slide if that's something I can do. This is it. This is how you get to all of the previous sessions. We have them all organized on this hub page here. You can't really see it, but once you click on this link, you'll go to archives.nolalibrary.org. Then you'll click on Identifying Your Catholic Ancestors Fall 2020 Genealogy Series. Once you get on that page, it's organized. There's session 1. You'll see a session 1 video recording. Please click on that to view it. There's session 2. There's also a session 2 video recording. You'll be able to click on that to get that. As of this Tuesday, session 3 will be posted as well under the session 3 section, which will be on that same page. Let's go back to keeping the contact information up for everybody. The website for non-residents to sign up for a library card, the one where you pay $50. So what you want to do, I'm going to use a sample from when I was showing people how to get to the databases here. So this is our website where it says locations, borrow, events, research, which I have circled here. You want to go to services right next door and then click on sign up for a library card. Near the bottom of that page, the information for getting a non-resident card is available. If you want to contact us during business hours, which is 10 to 5, Monday through Friday at this juncture, you could call if you're ready. I'm going to repeat this a couple times. And this is not for us. This is not for us. Use our number for questions for us. But if you're interested in a non-resident card, this is the number for you. Remember, they can't answer the other questions. Only we can do that. And I'll move back to our contact information. But this number, if you want to sign up for a non-resident card, is 504 596 2570. Again, this is only to ask about the card, but it is 504 596 2570. And again, when you go to our website as displayed here, it's the one next to research, services, and you want to click on that and choose library card information. Let's go back to our contact info. So if you want to ask us questions, instead of 2570, you're dialing 2610. That's how you ask us questions about our resources. Let's see here. I have a burial record from 1810 at St. Louis Cemetery. Is there any way to find the grave, or will it have been moved? That is for Heather and Katie.
Heather, I think this one is
can you read it one more time? I'm sorry, I was reading the chat questions.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, we're getting ahead. I have a burial record from 1810 at St. Louis Cemetery. Is there any way to find the grave, or will it have been moved?
1810, so that's, you might be lucky. In 1810, the cemetery footprint was significantly larger than the current day footprint. So it might have been that that tomb or vault was in a space that later was cut through by one of the major streets that now border the cemetery. So I would fill out the records request form with archives and have them do a burial search for actually, you go back, you don't go back to 1810.
We don't go back to 1810.
No.
We only have burial records. The oldest burial records we hold in the archives is 1833. You might be able to find some stuff off the funeral if there if
Mhm.
there's a funeral within our records, but that's the hard part. And if you have that burial, but if you have a burial record and it says a location, that might be if they already have one.
And if the tablet still exists, like using a tool like Find a Grave will maybe lead you to identifying where the tablet is within the cemetery, because somebody might have photographed it if it still exists, and that's an excellent way to search for that. Unfortunately, with those older burial records, it's really difficult because we have the funeral records for some individuals, but the records get pretty spotty that far back.
Okay, thank you. Let's see here. I have a question. I am a resident of Rapides Parish. Can I access this through state interlibrary loan? I'm not sure what this is, but if it's the databases, I want to take a look at Rapides Parish Library just a second here to see what they offer. Their webpage is rpl.org. I wanted to see if they offer any databases. Louisiana Library Connection. Oh, they seem to have a local obituary database. That might be worth checking out. I can't see what databases they offer because I don't have a Rapides Parish Library card. I only have an Orleans Parish Library card, and that's what it's showing me when I click on the databases. But if you would, go to rpl.org, choose eBranch, and then databases. And you should be able to find what databases that you offer. Interlibrary loan doesn't apply to databases because those aren't individually held materials. Those are owned by corporations and leased by libraries. So if Rapides Parish Library doesn't offer either of the ones that we have discussed today, I would say you may do best with a non-resident card. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. You mentioned looking for the closest church to the residence. I have found it helpful to look at the links for street name changes and street number changes to really figure out where the family lived. This is helpful. I have a relative who lived at 335 St. Anne, but that is really the 1600 block of current St. Anne, correct? Mm-hmm. Also for MAC controllers, Mac, this is important too. When we talked about Control F earlier, for Mac users, it's Command F. It's not Control F. It's Command F for Mac users. Excellent points. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, what she's saying about the street name change is actually something. Can you all tell me, are you seeing my, am I navigating the web in front of you on screen, y'all?
Yes. Yes.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so let's take a look at our website. Let me zoom in a little, if I can. Oh, shoot. Well, I apologize. It's going to be a little zoomed out. Let's see here. So, of course, here's the link to the hub page, but we have an index to street name changes on our website. I'm just going to click search and get to that. So in 1895, the streets were renumbered in New Orleans. So prior to 1895, you may have a residence. And if you're going to have to consult a map today, you may need the current address. And let's do a search to get us there of our resources. Okay, so that'll bring you to our alphabetical and numerical index of changes in street names and numbers, old and new, 1858 to 1938. So in this case, let's use this viewer's example. It is St. Anne Street. So let's see here, St. Andrew, St. Anne. So as you can see, her relative lived at, if we scroll down here, 335. And you see the cross streets here too. So even if things are a little off over here, pay attention to cross streets. So she lived in the and the numbers over here on the side are just the starting numbers for the left and right sides. They move on until the next section. But 335 falls, as she said, within the 1600 block. So this is really handy. Let's go back over this one more time. We go to archives.nolalibrary.org. I just click on our search bar and I did index street number changes. And there it is, alphabetical and numerical indexed changes in street numbers. The reason I've chosen to do it this way is I don't want to lead you through 800 clicks to remember. This is just faster. Our search function is super helpful for all our resources, if you know what you're looking for. And thank you for that point. That was very helpful to point out.
Another item I wanted to mention to everyone is, even though a church might be closest to where your ancestors might have lived, if a lot of churches were grouped by ethnicity. So in the Lower Garden District, for example, there were a few churches. We know that St. Mary's Assumption Church was mainly those with German heritage. St. Alphonsus was mostly Irish. So if you know that your ancestors came from Germany or came from Ireland or came from another place, you could look through and figure out more easily which church they might have belonged to based on that information as well. It kind of helps narrow it down.
That in the notes section. Let's see here. There was a newspaper article about the death of a relative that was unreadable. Yes, that happens often. That is correct. There was a newspaper article about the death of a relative that was unreadable. I sent in, and you typed the information and sent me what it said. We had to go back to the original paper because the microfilm was bad. That does happen sometimes. That is correct. If you run in that situation, as always, it's different from the way you describe it because it sounds like you went through this before COVID. But email us if for some reason the database image is bad. We will then check the original newspaper. We will then check the microfilm, and if that's bad, if we still have the original newspaper, we will even go back to that. Of course, we don't necessarily have all of the original newspapers anymore, but yes, we will do that if it's necessary. Trying to, and we'll do a couple more questions, and then we'll end. And of course, if we didn't get to your questions, I apologize. Please let me put up our contact information again. There it is. Please contact us if we don't get to your question today. But let's see here. Trying to backtrack death basic info, no names, obtained from a closed adoption. Wow, that is rare, y'all. I want you to know that is very rare. I know month and year of death, but have checked entire month. Could it be in paper other than Times-Picayune? It depends on the date. If there weren't other papers at the time, then no. If there were, maybe. It could also be that they did not have an obituary. It's all of those are possibilities, unfortunately. This is a good question. Is there a rule of thumb for how long a burial took after death? And when that began to change? It seems as though it was much quicker back in the day, most likely due to improved embalming. You are correct, sir. Yes, with improved embalming, especially in a subtropical climate like ours, that did change how long it was between death and burial. Sometimes people had burial announcements posted in the newspaper the evening of the morning they died in the early times when preservation was seriously an issue. Do you guys have anything in your experience?
Embalming didn't really catch on until after Abraham Lincoln's death. He kind of set the example for the nation to accept it because of his burial train. So prior to that, most people did not get embalmed, and even afterwards, it helped a lot during the Civil War to be able to have bodies brought back home to their hometowns. So that's anything prior to the Civil War, it's going to be very quick. And then as history progresses, it gets a little bit longer, but the Civil War is really the marking point to when it became common practice in most locales throughout the country.
Oh, that's wonderful information. I love that. That's really like a great way to put it. I love it. Let's see here. Does the non-resident card give access to different material than the reciprocal card? So what this person is talking about is that Jefferson Parish and New Orleans Parish offer a reciprocal borrowing agreement because the two libraries have come to an agreement. Unfortunately, nobody else at this time has come to an agreement with us, but having an Orleans Parish card will allow you to go get a Jefferson Parish card to get access to their stuff and vice versa. The $50 non-resident card does not give you access to different material than a reciprocal borrowing agreement. A non-resident and a reciprocal card give you access to the same materials. It's just another way to have a New Orleans library card. Let's see here. How long will the previous sessions be available on the library website? Forever. That is our new thing going forward. Now that we've moved on into virtual programming, we intend to have hub pages like this and recordings of any virtual programming we offer organized by the program series on our homepage of archives.nololibrary.org. As long as YouTube will host our videos, we will host them for you. They will always be up. Let's see here. And yeah, the presentation slides, they will totally be up there for you to print in the future. Okay, I'm gonna take 3 more questions and then we're gonna stop. Thank you all. Thank you all for being so patient. And thank you for all the excellent questions. This has been really helpful, I hope, for everybody. It's been helpful for me even. I'm learning a couple things. Let's see here. Is there a way to find out what funeral homes were in business during the late 1800s and early 1900s? There is. It's not exhaustive. But your best bet will be city directories, the businesses sections, and newspaper ads from the time period in question. You could search the newspapers for the time period instead of browse like we did today. You could search the newspapers for the time period for various funeral names, or you could look at the city directories for that time period, which if it's late 1800s and early 1900s, they are available through ancestry.com, and as somebody let me know, fold3.com. They're apparently more easily searchable through Fold3. Both of these are databases that you can get with our library card right now. You can search for different funeral homes.
Another interesting thing with funeral homes, a lot of institutions here in the city have the funeral home archival records because they've donated them. So the Historic New Orleans has some, the University of New Orleans has some, and those are really interesting because sometimes they have funeral receipts from families. So you might luck out and see a receipt that your ancestor might have had a copy of. Those are a great resource as well.
I didn't know that.
I spend a lot of
time. A lot of times I'm like, looking at business, I'm not sure. But so, okay, so Historic New Orleans Collection and UNO.
Yeah, UNO definitely has one.
I'm going to look into that some more to add it. That's excellent. Because a lot of times, you know, business archives aren't ever a given. You know, it just really depends. But that's good to know about some of the funeral homes. I'm excited about that because I know also a lot of them just lost so much in Katrina.
Yep.
You know. Okay. Is Find a Grave on the New Orleans Public Library site? No, it's just findagrave.com. Just go to findagrave.com. Okay. So it's 12:23. We've gone ahead and done some extra questions. I'm gonna call it here. I'm gonna leave the information up a little bit longer. I want to thank everybody for coming again. This is much appreciated. We are so happy to see this much interest. We're so happy to work with y'all, the Archdiocese and the cemeteries, to be able to present this sort of information. And this is super educational, and you guys are so fabulous to work with. And I'm glad that like everybody is here to learn today. We will, of course, same bat time, same bat channel, we will have next week's presentation. I will get the slides and the recording of this presentation up on the website by Tuesday this week. And of course, send us all your questions. We will answer them during regular business hours. If you send me questions today and tomorrow, I will get to them on Monday and Tuesday. No problem. And thank you all. Thank you all again for returning. Thank you all for learning with us today. We really appreciate like you as patrons, as researchers and genealogists. This has been very invigorating for me. I hope that everybody has a wonderful day. Katie and Heather, thank you again so much.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or?
No, thanks everyone for joining us.
Okay, Thank you. Thank you for spending another Saturday with us. The next one will, of course, be Archdiocesan Indexes and Digital Resources, and that will be October 3rd from 11 to 12. Very excited about that one. I'll have the resources posted also probably by Tuesday for this upcoming session. Please feel free to share with anybody you want to. Share on Facebook, check it all out. We love having people from everywhere. Even if you aren't in the area, we will try to give you information on what you can access and how.
And if you are on Facebook, we have a Facebook event for each session. So that's easily shareable. It has a link to the event. And it's an easy way to share with your followers. Yes,
yes. And that's, I know for us, it's facebook.com/LouDiv for LOUDIV. That's short for Louisiana Division, the name that we are transitioning out of. But it's LouDiv. And then y'all are
NOLA Catholic Cemeteries.
Facebook.com/NOLA Catholic Cemeteries.
Mm-hmm. It might just be STEM.
You guys, yeah. Got it. Okay. Well, thank y'all. I will leave this up for a couple more minutes and hope to see you next week.
Thanks.
Bye, y'all.
Thanks, guys.